We look forward to learning more about tools and strategies that we can use to become more comfortable making basic decisions regarding materials usage and copyright considerations in the pursuit of language teaching and learning. Please help me welcome Julie.
Hey, thank you, Serene and Angelica. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, everybody online. I know copyright is not the sexiest of topics, but it is really important. And I'm hoping that you all take at least one new thing away from my talk today. If that happens, I will consider this a success. First of all, a disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is purely informational, and the hope is to educate you more so that you feel more confident when you have to use materials in your classroom or in your personal life, or even materials around which you have your own copyright. So we'll start off with what is copyright. It was written into the US Constitution. And the purpose, this always got to me because this isn't really evident, but the purpose of copyright is to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. And that is by giving creators, authors and creators, incentive to create by giving them protection so that they can make money from their creations, but also so they feel confident getting their work out into the public so we can build a society that progresses in its knowledge. So even though it's several hundred years old, it's still very vital, and it is that balance between the user rights and the creator rights. It's that tension that we still struggle with today, and it's what can be very frustrating, but it's also what is kind of beautiful about the whole concept. So what gets copyright? As soon as something is fixed in any medium, it automatically has copyright. And I'm going to talk about a couple of myths as I go through here. So some of the myths are, if a work does not have the little copyright symbol on it, that it is not protected. That is not the case. As I just stated, anything that you put in a fixed medium has copyright protection. So my PowerPoint presentation has copyright protection. Your grocery list has copyright protection. Maybe. There has to be some creativity there. There's also a concept called the poor man's copyright, which you may have heard about, and it's mailing a work to yourself so that you're getting a date. You mail it, you keep it in a sealed envelope, and so the post office puts a date on it, so that's verifying the date that you actually had this completed work. That does not constitute a registration of copyright. If you want to register your copyright, you have to go through the Federal Copyright Office. This may help you in court, but when you want to get something, why you would want to get something registered is if you feel like you would want to take somebody to court for infringing on your copyright, and you would want the possibility of getting statutory damages and your lawyer's fee paid for. So those are two very good reasons to register. Otherwise, it really isn't necessary. You can put your own copyright symbol on there, put your contact information, and that suffices. You have copyright protection. So what are the rights when you hold copyright? You can make duplicates of your work. You can sell it, lease it, rent it, give it away. You determine how you disseminate it into the public. You can display it or perform it, such as with music or plays or film. And then you can create derivatives off of it. And translation is a derivative, considered a derivative, as an example. So we talked about the rights, and now let's talk about what actually gets protected. Something gets protected if it has a modicum of creativity to it. And a modicum is just the tiniest bit of creativity. So books, movies, letters, everything on the left here gets protection. Things that do not get protection are facts and discoveries and ideas. You can copyright the expression of your idea, but the idea itself is not copyrightable. Genres, and most databases, because they are mostly factually based and organized in a logical manner. Other things that do not get copyright protection are those in the public domain. So all works by the federal government are automatically in the public domain. State government works, it depends on the state you are in. And looking at the New York State government office, they do maintain some copyright on some of their documents, and some they put into the public domain. So if you're interested in working with that content, you really need to look at what they're holding copyright on and what they're putting into the public domain. From here, it gets really complicated. So you might have heard that in January, Mickey Mouse went into the public domain. That was big news. Works created before 1928 and sound recordings from 1923 are now entered into the public domain. But anything after that, it really depends on the year it was created and the country in which it was created. So it gets very complicated. And I'll share these slides with Angelica, who can send them out. I do have a document with resources on it. And one of the documents on the public domain is created right here at Cornell. It's the Lib Guide from the Cornell Library. And it is referenced in any professional talk I've ever been in around public domain. They reference that. So it's a very authoritative resource for you. And once you look at the table there, you would be amazed at how complicated it gets. So we were talking about the rights of the creators, and now we're going to talk about the rights of the users. Copyright in the classroom. Basically in the classroom, as you all know, if you're teaching, you can do just about anything. You can show movies, you can read from books, you can perform plays, show images, if you're in a nonprofit in-person educational institution. What you might not know is this is an explicit right given to you. This isn't just common sense, which you'd think it would be, right? But this is actually written into the law. And this applies as long as the copy you're using was legally made. Other limitations are it doesn't cover works that you have students work on outside of class. So you're a Canvas campus. If you upload media readings to Canvas, you cannot use this exemption. In order to do that, you'd have to look at some other rights. Also with your research, it's not covered. And then online classes provide a really challenging situation. If they're open to the public, such as MOOCs, they are definitely not, because it's not contained. If you have a Zoom class, an online Zoom class, and you want to show a movie, you're probably going to use the other exemptions, because this isn't recognized. Even though you're there with your students face-to-face, it isn't recognized as a face-to-face class in terms of this law. The next user right I'm going to talk about is fair use. It is Fair Use Week. Who knew to celebrate fair use? So there are 4 criteria that you have to look at when you're making a fair use case. Fair use means you're making an argument that your use is fair and that you are not infringing on the copyright holder's rights. So you're going to be looking at the purpose, the nature, the amount, and the effect on the market. So here, basically, you're looking at a spectrum of fair use to infringing. So for purpose, if the use is socially beneficial, you're using it for teaching, not for profit, and the use is transformative, that means you're using it for a use that it wasn't intended for, such as using a feature film to teach culture or grammar. That weighs on the fair use end of the spectrum. If your use creates a derivative work, if you're creating a translation, if the scope is ongoing, you're doing it semester after semester after semester. If it's a feature film and you've had a hard week and you're just going to show this film on a Friday, that weighs against you on fair use. And of course, if it's for profit, that weighs against you. So what you're doing is you're going to take all 4 factors and look at how much you have on the positive end, how much you have on the negative end, and in totality, make that determination on whether you think your use is fair or not. This is what I hear a lot. My use is for education, so I can do whatever I want. That is not the case. You have to evaluate all 4 factors. Next, we're going to talk about the nature of the work. So what counts as fair use is the work has to have been published. If it's factual nature, that weighs in favor of fair use. And if it was not created for the purpose that you are using it for. If it was never published, if it's highly creative, or if it's consumable, that weighs more on the infringing end of it. So think about what was the purpose of the work. Next is the amount. If you only use the amount that you actually need for your purpose, that weighs in your favor. And sometimes it is the entire work, sometimes it's not. If the portion used is not the heart of the work, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then against is the entire work or the heart of the work is used. And then a portion greater than what is needed is used. Now, this gets tricky. The myth here is, and I don't know if any of you have heard this, that you can safely use 10% of any work and then you're not infringing. That is a guideline that was published many years ago. That does not keep you safe from litigation. You're still infringing. The other consequence of this is I've seen instructors just try and get that down to that 10% to, be in that safe harbor, but they need more. If you need more, make the case for the amount you need to use, right? Don't limit yourself there. And if it is the heart of the work, that's like the very, that's hard to describe. So what's that movie, I See Dead People? The Sixth Sense. So if you were just going to use the very end scene where he realizes he's actually dead, sorry if that's a spoiler for anyone, that might be considered the heart of the work, and that might be considered against fair use as opposed to for fair use. And the last criteria is the effect on the market. So if it's out of print, there's no licensing available, that goes towards fair use. There's little or no negative impact on the economic value. If you cannot identify the copy holder, and if this is the case, you have to do a good faith effort to locate the copyright holder. And if you can't, or they're not responding, keep that documentation that you did indeed try to contact them, because that, if you make a fair use case, then that weighs in your favor. Even if the copyright holder shows up later, you can say, well, I couldn't find you, and this is what I did. You have to use a legal copy of the work, and giving attribution is always good. If the work is in print and there is licensing, if there is a market for the work that you are infringing on, if you decide you don't want to purchase it, you'd rather just use it fair use, make a fair use case, that weighs against you. If you were denied a request for permission, that weighs against you. But that doesn't mean that you can't make a fair use case if you were denied permission. It just means for this one factor, it's in the infringing pocket. If you have a really strong fair use case in the positive end of that, you can still make a fair use case. So that's why it's really important to take into account all 4 factors. And here's some more myths. I see this on YouTube all the time. I don't own this material, no copyright infringement intended. Well, you're infringing, right? And you might get called out on it. I gave the author credit, so I'm not breaking the law. And if I found it online, I can do whatever I want with it. These are all myths. You can certainly go ahead with it, but there might be consequences. So just so you know. Now, discipline-specific considerations. There is an international treaty called the Berne Convention, and the most important concept of this is called national treatment. And so this is where all the country signatories agree to treat copyright protected work according to their own laws. This also means that if you go to another country, you have to adhere to their copyright laws. Do you even know their copyright laws? Internationally, laws around public domain, fair use and fair dealing, and the face-to-face teaching exemption can be very different. For example, in Canada, they did not have the face-to-face teaching exemption until just several years ago. So we would be at conferences with these faculty members and they're like, no, I have to write and get permission, or I have to pay for the rights just to show a movie in class, right? They've changed that law, but it was just mind-bending that, that's when you realize how lucky you are. The other aspect to this is at Michigan, we have some classes that will do the second year intensive 8 weeks in the target country. So in France or in Costa Rica. And our faculty, when they first started doing this, they said, oh, I'm just going to take my course from Michigan, take it over to the country, and do the same class. And then they requested all their movies to be streamed. And we're like, no, we can't stream because it's over the border. It's not legal. You have to figure out how to get that content that you need or alternate content. And that was a real wake up because some of them unfortunately contacted us like a week before they were to go abroad. And that was really unfortunate. So that was a lot of scrambling. So it's really important to think about where you are using the media. So I've thrown a lot of information at you. And we're going to get to some scenarios to walk through them to see how this actually applies to some real life situations. But first, I want to go through a framework of evaluation. This was created by the University of Michigan Copyright Office, who are amazing, and I have linked to a bunch of their pages. They've got some wonderful resources that anybody can access. So the first question you ask, is the work protected by copyright, and by whom? So if it's protected by you, you created it, it's fine, you can do what you want with it. There are multiple authors. Each author holds copyright to that work. And if it's an international work, this is where it gets tricky. Who actually owns those rights? Is it the producer? Is it the distributor? If they have North American and Asian distributors, you don't know how much of those rights they have given to the distributor. So even if the filmmaker is your brother-in-law or your best friend, and they say, oh yeah, go ahead and use it. If they gave away their rights, you're really not in legal compliance with that. Does the license exist for your particular use? Check your library for licenses. I checked the Cornell Library. I know you've got items from Swank, from Canopy, from Alexander Street Press, also Lumiere, I just found out. These you can use, just plop them in your course, do what you need to do. They also, I know on our campus, they subscribe to image databases and music databases. So those are great resources to look for content to use for your classes. Public performance licenses for the student orgs who want to have movie nights. We get that constantly, those requests. And we have to tell them, if you're not showing the movie in a class or in your home with your family and friends, you need public performance rights. And sometimes those go for hundreds of dollars. The nice thing is that Canopy, their films come with public performance. So if student clubs or groups are coming to you, send them right to Canopy and hopefully they can find something on that platform to show. Next, we have the Creative Commons license. And you'll see the logo here. I'm sure you've seen this online. This is an open licensing scheme. And this is great. There's even search engines where you can just search Creative Commons things. And this one is by an SA. So by means you have to give attribution to the author when you use it. And share alike, SA is share alike. So you have to use the same license when you put your work out there. And I've linked to the Creative Commons webpage too. So if you want to learn more about that, it tells you more about what each of the codes mean, and it also has a tool to walk you through, depending on what you want your use to be, what license they would recommend for you. Now, the last item here is terms of use, and this is something that's coming up constantly on our campus, is people saying, oh, I want to show Netflix, and or I want to show something off of Amazon Prime. You know, that little box that you check real quick and you don't read all the terms because you just want to watch your movie or listen to your music. That's what tells you that you cannot use this in the classroom. You are agreeing, you are contractually agreeing that you're only going to use that media for your own personal use, right? And so it really is difficult. One of the things I do is if it's a Netflix only title, I'll go and see if they've released it on DVD. If they have it on DVD and it's for sale, buy the DVDs. Same content, different format. It's a little wacky, but that's what you have there. So the terms of use is really impacting education these days. Next question to ask is, does the user right apply? So can you use the face-to-face teaching exemption, fair use, the TEACH Act, which defines online teaching, obsolete media, you're allowed to convert that to update it so you can use it. So if you've got that old VHS tape that you just have to use in class, you can digitize it and use that. And if none of these apply, think about, is there an alternative available? And unfortunately, with the terms of use, more and more content being licensed and not sold, this is more of a reality for us. But also don't be afraid to ask for permission. And we've had pretty good luck, even, you know, strangers on YouTube in Spain, you know, just writing to them and saying, can we use your video? And it's been pretty positive. Not always, but. So now I want to walk through a couple of scenarios and see what the issues might be that you think about given this presentation. So scenario number one is distance education. You're teaching a class on film in Latin America and you want to show a clip of a movie. You have access to the film in a digital format and you would like to show it during a Zoom class. Can you show it? What are the questions you're going to be asking? Yep, is the Zoom class protected or open? That's a good one. Sorry for the people on Zoom. Okay, thanks, Angelica. All right, so questions to ask. Is this a legal copy? Which several people got to. Are you at a nonprofit institution? Is the material integral to the class? Is enrollment limited? And was the material made explicitly for classroom use? If it was, then you have to seek permission to use it. Okay, scenario number two. You'd like to show students that ChatGPT can be used for educational purposes, but must be used responsibly. In order to demonstrate, you show an outline for a paper that ChatGPT created, as well as a completed paper that utilized this outline, but was still your own work. What requirements might there be, if any, to display this? Yeah, good. So actually, there are no restrictions on it. There has been a case in court, but you're right. I mean, ChatGPT is really new, but there is the case. Does this image look familiar of this monkey? Yep, he took a selfie. So a photographer left a camera out and the monkey picked it up and he took this selfie and the photographer put it online and it went viral. And so then a case was brought, and I believe it was the photographer saying that the monkey held the copyright to the photograph. I think that's what was the issue there. And the court ruled that works created by non-human authors are public domain. So there are no restrictions. What's interesting is that with the outline of from ChatGPT, that is a public domain, but the paper you wrote from that, you hold the copyright to that. And it's wise to be transparent about where you're using AI in your work. If just for the fact that you want to model good practice for your students, but there really is no best practice as of yet as to how to cite it. So there's, I mean, you can, I'm sure, just Google it. tomorrow, next month, you'll get different answers. In 6 months, you'll get more answers. Okay, scenario number 3. You want to have students watch a Netflix documentary for homework, but not every student has access to a Netflix account. You'd rather not require students to pay for a membership. Can you give students without accounts access to your own account? What about showing the movie in class? No. That says it, right? No, you cannot do it. The video librarians have been hammering at Netflix for years to create educational exemptions for their titles, and Netflix has not budged, except a couple years ago, they did offer a limited amount of documentaries for educational use. That didn't do us any good in the languages because they were all English language titles. And they, as far as I know, haven't moved forward from that. But you have to have your own account. Of course, students can get together and have little individual watch parties for things that are required by homework. Okay, scenario number 4, YouTube. You want to show a YouTube video in class in the following scenarios: a short clip about a country from a travel YouTube channel, a full-length film posted by the production company or director of a film, and several videos in parts of a full-length film. Yeah, so if you, that's an interesting question. I mean, yeah, if you are taking that and profiting from it, then you are infringing. But in an educational institution, that is allowed. This really goes not to the user rights, but to the legality of what you're using. So the first 2 scenarios, as you mentioned, are most likely legal copies. And the third is most likely not a legal copy. And when you're using something iffy like that, for any of these, the user could take it down at any minute. And you know it's going to be right before a test, like the final exam where you have this here. It's going to be at the worst possible time. Yes.
I was wondering, what is a short clip? Can you go back to the screen before?
Oh.
Clip. So what does that
So
is it a legal term? That's what I'm getting.
No, it's just a description. So it could be the clip itself is very short. Maybe it's a 30-second clip from a travel channel, or maybe it's 2 minutes and you're taking 30 seconds of it. It could be either one, but it's not a legal term at all. It's not defined. There's also the case where if you have something that is perfectly legal, but YouTube flags it for copyright infringement, and they take it down, that can be difficult as well. I was actually at a showcase, end of term showcase, and a student literally pulled it up, saw his entire final project on YouTube, sat down. 2 minutes later, he got up to present it to the group, and YouTube took it down. And that was just the end of it. And it was just heartbreaking for the student. And we couldn't believe it happened at that moment. So I'm going to end this presentation with some consideration for you as authors and creators, because we're not just consumers of media and works. You have to think about the institutional policies. So how many of you here know what Cornell's copyright policy is for faculty, staff, and students? It's important to find that out, and find that out before you have something that you've created and are making assumptions. And then you find out, oh, you really don't have the rights you thought you had. If you're a work for hire, that means someone hires you specifically to create something, then your employer will own the copyright in whatever you create. If there are multiple authors, and this happens a lot with films, where you've got the producer, the filmmaker, the composer, there's many different people who have copyright in a work, edited volumes. You have to consider how many authors go into the creation of something. if you're using protected content in your work, so something that has copyright, you have to make sure that you have the rights to use that in your work, especially if you're going to sell it. And this is something, if it's a grant-funded project or a publisher, they usually insist on proof that you've gotten all the rights cleared before they will publish something. But it's also really important when you are given contracts, when you get a grant or with a publisher, read it very carefully, because especially with publishers, they want the rights. They want all the rights. I mean, I'm not saying all publishers are evil, but you know, that's their business. They want the rights. And you don't have to, you can push back on that. So the U of M Lab Guide that I was telling you about on copyright, it gives you phrases that you can insert, alternate phrases where you're saying, you know, to the publisher, I'll give you certain rights, but I'm not giving you exclusive rights. I want to retain some of my rights. And then there's a negotiation there, right? You don't have to accept wholesale what the contract that they're giving you. And I've had several faculty members at Michigan sign away their rights, not realize it, and then they want to use their textbook or their media, and then they realize like the publisher's charging the students an exorbitant rate, or they can't use it the way they wanted to, and it was really unfortunate. You can request that you maintain some rights. Now, if it's a grant-funded project, they might say, well, you're not getting the funding. So then you just have to decide, which way am I going to go here? How important is this to me? So that's the end of my presentation. Here is a short URL to the resource page I was telling you about. It's also a QR code. And I will share this with Angelica, so if she sends it out, you'll have access to all of this. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Time for questions.
Thank you very much. I have a question about something. I teach German, so it would be from Germany. The equivalent of NPR TV, and I tend to use something that is about a minute or a minute and a half from the news. And I don't get any license, I just do it. But is there a difference when it's something like NPR, public, whatever?
So if it's like a public broadcast or emission, I would imagine it's okay. It's not something you're subscribing to. And is it something that we're able to access in the States? Because I know Germany sometimes restricts. So I think you're fine using that in the classroom, especially if it's just a small portion. And again, think about the purpose. It's educational. You're you know, doing something pedagogical with it. I think that sounds like a good use. And if you're concerned, if you're on the fence about this, definitely contact a professional. Librarians are great, especially, you know, the one who wrote the public domain. Go find that person and ask them and help them give you advice. The other thing, if you are infringing, chances are that you will get a cease and desist, and you just have to stop using it. The other thing is if you are educating yourself on copyright and you are moving forward with your best educated effort towards what you are using, that really weighs for you too. So chances are you're not going to get sued individually for infringing. So what, you know, back in the day, before we had our copyright office, people were really afraid and they would, you know, not use things and not really push that envelope. But we got this copyright office and these professionals in there, and they're like, push it. Let's see what we can get with the usage. Let's do what we need to do for education, which I really loved that attitude. So do what's within your comfort level. I mean, I'm not saying go out and go crazy with the with the usage, But really think carefully about it and don't, if at all possible, don't restrict yourself because you're afraid of getting sued. And you might want to look into Cornell's policy on protection and copyright and that sort of thing, and who holds the copyright here.
We have an online question for you.
Yes.
Is there any distinction made for what is allowed when creating assessments versus using a video or text during an in-person lesson? For example, using text excerpts for reading comprehension exercises on tests.
I would say that sounds like a fair use to me because the text excerpt most likely is used for informative purposes or for reading if it's fiction, but your purpose is to test comprehension, vocabulary, grammar, whatever that is. So your purpose is educational, socially beneficial. I would argue that that's a fair use. Thank you, Laurel.
Other questions in the audience here? Wait.
I use a lot of images in my PowerPoints when I'm teaching. Do I have to be careful which image to use, or do I always have to put where I found the images?
Best practice is to cite where you got your images from. Yeah, another thing is, where did you get them? Did you get them from an image database that Cornell licensed? Then you're fine. If you're pulling them off the internet, it might not be fine. You might want to, put a URL. You could also link to the image. That's perfectly acceptable. I know it's not as pretty in a PowerPoint. If you are not handing that PowerPoint out, you're protecting that content. So that's going to weigh in your favor. And you can also lower the resolution on images so that you're not producing an exact replica of what that was. And that is also more of a fair use.
Would it be further protected if it's on Canvas? So only accessible to students enrolled in a particular class if we use those images in a PowerPoint?
So with images, it's tricky because it's really easy to click the save image as and download it. With streaming media, it's actually easier because it's harder for students to capture that illegally. So that's why if you put it in Canvas, I would recommend a lower resolution. So, and if the student's like, oh, I need a poster of this and they're gonna blow it up, it's gonna look awful, right? So yeah, send them to the source, have them go through legal channels to get that image.
Other questions, either in the room or, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a part of the Translate and Endure program. We're actually meeting with you tomorrow. So it's very nice to see you today beforehand. Yeah, and I guess like for our work, so we do like volunteer trainings and agency trainings. So I'm wondering, I don't think we use anything that's licensed, but like if we were to, is there any like educational like exemptions that apply in our case? We're not technically like, in a classroom, but like for our trainings and like doing nonprofit work, like is there any exemptions that would apply for our mission?
That's a good question. I would say you could use fair use, depending on what it is you're using, and going through the 4 factors and saying, okay, we're really doing, our best understanding and practice of what fair use is. I would say that's fine. It was really interesting for me to learn that translation is a protected right. So I'm sure a lot of the things that you're translating are from agencies who have created the forms or informational things, whatever. So it's, it's fine. But if someone, like we started a translation service and someone said, I've got this German lit book and I want this chapter translated into English, and that's That's where you get iffy when you're not the copyright holder.
No. You mentioned something like, say, for example, one material is I'm using under fair use consideration, but you said as long as it is legally copied. So could you elaborate on that? Like, what is legally copied and what is not?
So if you have a legal copy of it, a good example is DVDs. So I had a colleague go over to India, and sometimes we say, if you're traveling abroad, buy what you need for your class and I'll reimburse you because we have a library. And so she came back and she had all of these DVDs that she bought from a gas station. And the cover was obviously photocopied, right? It was not a commercially produced DVD. And we're like, yeah, you can't really use that, right? Or if it's something, you record The Sixth Sense off your TV or off of Netflix, and then you bring it into class. You can't use that because it's not a legally acquired object. So you have to make sure that you have legally acquired whatever it is you're using. That makes sense?
So I don't show videos in class, but sometimes I give students a link so that they can go to the link. But sometimes the link itself might not be, I mean, YouTube is okay, but there is a certain place where you can watch a Japanese TV drama.
Mhm.
And I wonder if this is a legal site or not. If there's no doubt, if there's any doubt, I should not give the link to the students. Is that correct?
Well, technically, yes, I think. And it's really hard with that content that, it's not like you can go out to Amazon and just buy it off of there. And what we found is, as much as we try and get legal copies and legal streaming and rights, the students are still going to go out and Google it and find whatever stream they can find, and they don't really care. So I think it's a matter of, it's ethical, right? Do I really want to promote watching potentially illegal streams? You can see if there's, you could try and do a little research. Is it really an illegal transmission of this show? Are there other shows you can use? But I won't tell anyone you're doing it. Yeah.
Adjust some voices digitally.
I'd like to go back to your earlier slides, and you said if it's facts, it would be okay. Now, facts are not necessarily facts, even though they come on the first sight, it looks like a fact. And depending on, who put it together and in what way. And so what are facts?
That's a really loaded question these days. I think when this was written, it was, the state of affairs. The news was news. Of course, there's always been the kind of trash talk with the politics and all that. But really, it's really loaded, like the truth, right? What is the truth? I don't know how to answer that.
We have another question online from Laurel. Is it considered to be, quote, legally acquired if I use an app to convert a broadcast news clip into an MP4? So basically, am I doing anything illegal by saving the MP4 for use in my class?
So you want to look at who owns the copyright, how are you accessing it? Is it a subscription? Is it just out there on the web? I don't think you are doing anything illegal by converting it and using it in your class. Unless there are factors you're not adding in there, like I have to subscribe to get to this news channel. So if you're subscribing to TV5, I would take a look at the terms of use and see what those are. Otherwise, I think if it's just out there on the open broadcast and you're just using a small clip, that should be fine. And converting it to use in class is not an issue.
Any other questions for Julie? Oh, yep.
So I know that like at the University of Southern California for film students, they like the university owns the rights to the film that the student produces. So I was wondering if you know anything about like with regards to students creating presentations. Let's say we're doing an oral final project in a class. Like, do we have the rights to that presentation, or does the university have the right to that presentation?
That's where you have to check the policies on your institution. I would really, really hope that Cornell gives the students their intellectual property. But as you said, there's a group of you, so it would be each one of you contributing to that holds copyright in that. But do check out the copyright policy for students from Cornell. I know at Michigan, they don't claim any intellectual property for student work, which is great. For staff, they claim it all. And then they give back rights. So it's basically a joint ownership.
Any last questions for Julie? Is there anything else online, Sam? Okay, wonderful. Well, please help me thank Julie for this very informative presentation today. I think this is a very important topic that we all need to think about as we have our students engage with the learning materials that we provide them with. So thank you, Julie, for joining us today and for this great presentation.
Thank you so much.